Getting shiny Pokemon is one of the most tedious things you can do in any Pokemon game. Typically, the chance of finding a shiny is about 1 in every 8,192 encounters, but in Pokemon Renegade Platinum, the odds are actually 1 in every 512. I'd love to say that makes this game easier to complete, but it's not the case, as this is one of the most difficult, time-consuming ROM hacks you can ever attempt. It takes some people weeks or even months to complete this game on its own, while I have to do it using only shiny Pokemon and the hardcore nuzlocke rule set. So yeah, as you can tell, this video is definitely gonna make me suffer, so I hope you all enjoy, and with that, I'm ready to get into it by naming myself Zango and getting ready to pick my starter. For a ROM hack of this magnitude, picking your starter is a very important decision. To help me make the choice, I decided to go through each and every gym and important battle in the game to figure out what's gonna be best for my team in the future. In the end, I stumbled upon a pretty easy decision, which is Chimchar. Not only does it have the best potential hidden ability of the 3 Pokemon in Iron Fist, but it also has pretty favorable matchups into 3 of the 8 gym leaders, Gardenia, Byron, and Candace. On top of that, Infernape is definitely the fastest of the 3 Pokemon, which means I can use its speed to my advantage really early on in the run. With all that being said, my starter's definitely going to be Chimchar, so this is where I begin my first shiny hunt. I'm getting about 1 encounter every 30 seconds, which is 2 per minute, 120 per hour, and an estimated time to find my shiny Chimchar in about 4.5 hours. Sadly, it ended up taking way longer than that as I got really unlucky, and I was about 3 times over odds when I found myself this shiny Chimchar. This shiny took me about 14.5 hours, and immediately after I get it, I've got to go into a rival battle. Because it's the first one in the game, it's not actually too difficult, kinda just spam scratch over and over again until I win. Once I do, I check out that nature on my Chimchar, and it's naughty, which isn't that great, but I guess it's not that bad because the attack boost. I also get to see my ability, which is Iron Fist, and that's way better than Blaze, so I'm super happy about that. We then do a little bit of story talking to my mom, then the leader of Team Galactic somehow? Not really sure how that happened. Regardless, I'm able to go a little bit further into the game where I nicknamed my Chimchar Apollo. I head back to my house once more to talk to my mom one final time before stealing her Eevee and leaving. Unfortunately, this Eevee isn't shiny, so I just go ahead and throw it out while I get myself in a rival battle with Dawn. Dawn's only got a level 9 Turtwig at this point, so my Chimchar just burns it alive as I then get ready to start another shiny hunt. The reason I'm doing this shiny hunt so close to my other one is because I don't actually think I can beat this next rival battle. Alone, my Chimchar really stands no chance against Barry's team being Starly, Munchlax, and Piplup. That being said, on Route 202, there's actually a lot of good Pokemon that I have access to, so this is where I start my next hunt. This ended up being a relatively quick one, as after about 3.5 hours, I find myself this shiny Shinx. Shinx is not only a really great shiny, but it also has the ability Intimidate, which is one of the best in the game. Once I finally get him in the ball, I give him the nickname Zeus, then check out that nature, and it's Jolly, which is speed up and special attack down, so I don't really mind it. From here, I finally go into Jubilife City, where I've got to do a bunch of little story adventures while I pick up items all over the place. In this ROM hack, there are good items and TMs everywhere, which will be super useful throughout this run. That being said, I'm pretty sure I won't need an item for this next battle against Barry. He leads the fight with Starly, as I lead with Shinx. Barry starts by hitting me with a growl, lowering my attack by 1 stage as I go for a spark, nearly killing the Starly in 1 shot. On the next turn, Barry decides to heal as I raise my attack by 1 stage with Howl. This Starly is super annoying and tries to lower my attack again with another growl. It's after this that I go for a spark, Howl, and quick attack combo to take down Starly and bring out the next Pokemon, Munchlax. Munchlax really only tries to raise his special defense, but that's not much of a problem as I'm a physical attacker. That being said, all it takes is a pair of sparks to deal with Munchlax, as well as the Piplup following that, and that wins me my rival battle against Barry. Now I head towards Orberg City, and on my way there, my Shinx evolves into a Luxio. On my way to the city, I meet up with Barry again. He doesn't really give me much useful information except that I need to find the gym leader, which I do. Eventually, I find him in the Orberg mine, but after taking a pretty good look at my team, I figure out there's no way I beat him. Not only does he have 6 Pokemon, but most of them are super effective against my Pokemon. That being said, I've got to start a 3rd shiny hunt before the first gym, and to be honest, I don't know if I've ever done that in these types of videos. Regardless, it's kind of just what I have to do. I mean, there's no way I beat it with my current team, so I head back to the Orberg Gate where there are a lot of good encounters that I can utilize. While I was doing my shiny hunt, Apollo actually ended up evolving into Monferno, and not long after, I found myself a shiny Riolu. It's a pretty good shiny, and not only is it one of the best Pokemon on this route, but it also only took about 2.5 hours to get, so I'm extremely happy. Unfortunately, I can't really say that about the next shiny, but we'll get there when we get there. Once I catch Riolu, I give it the nickname Aries, then check out its nature, being serious. This is just one of the neutral natures, but its ability is steadfast, which on its own isn't good, but it actually turns into adaptability. That's a super good ability that doubles the power of my stab moves. That being said, before I decide to evolve Riolu, I get myself some speed EVs that'll be much needed in this battle. They don't really accumulate to too much right now, but I'm hoping by the end of the game, I'll be able to outspeed a lot of key threats. Regardless, after getting a few extra stat points, I evolve Riolu into Lucario with friendship by simply just running back and forth forever. With Lucario finally on the team, I'm ready to challenge Rourke for my first gym badge. I lead this fight with Lucario as he decides to lead with his Nose Pass. Nose Pass is actually a pretty heavy Pokemon, and Low Kick is a little bit more powerful than Force Palm, and it takes it down with a one-shot. The next Pokemon, Geodude, goes down to a Force Palm, as the third Pokemon, Onix, might be a little bit more trouble. The reason for this is because Onix has a defense stat of 160, which is massive, but so is Onix. I mean, this thing weighs like 10 dump trucks. Okay, well, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but my Low Kick still has 120 base power, which is 240 with adaptability. That being said, it becomes a pretty easy one-shot, and with the next Pokemon being Larvitar, I'm pretty confident I can win this thing. On the first turn, Larvitar tries to activate its guts by going for a Protect as it has a Flame Orb. Unfortunately for Larvitar, this was never going to do much as I always outspeed here and definitely one-shot. Bonsly and Craniados are the last two Pokemon, and neither of them are too heavy, so I decide to hit them both with Force Palms and finish them off, winning myself my first gym battle. With that relatively easy battle down, I head back to Jubilife City where I can fight Team Galactic. Thankfully for me, my Lucario kinda just carries this early game and is sweeping most of the Pokemon I go up against. Unfortunately, I've got to see a little bit more of Team Galactic in Floroma Town, then go to Valley Windworks to deal with Commander Mars. Or is this one Jupiter? I can't ever remember. In this battle, I decide to lead with Luxio, who gets an easy one-hit KO on Zubat, bringing out the worst Pokemon ever, Purugly. For many people, this can decide your run, but thankfully, I've got Lucario, and not only that, Monferno, so this is actually a pretty easy win for me. Purugly does still end up being pretty annoying as it puts me to sleep, but in the end, it really doesn't matter as Force Palm does enough to kill. With the last two Pokemon being Yanma and Bronzor, I'm pretty confident I win, and I do. Now that she's down, I find out that Team Galactic is going to Eterna City, so that's where I decide to go next. While on my way there, I find myself in a fight with Cheryl, which I honestly didn't expect as it's not in the base game. Thankfully, the fight was easy and not really too much to comment on here other than the fact that I kinda just swept her. With her defeated, I walk her out of Eterna Forest safely, then head into Eterna City. In the city, I walk into the Pokemart and buy a ton of repels. Now you may be asking, why are you doing this, Zango? And to that I say, because I'm crazy. This leads to possibly one of the worst shiny hunts I've ever subjected myself to, looking for a shiny Misdreavus. Let me head back a few steps though. The reason why I bought the repels in the first place was to use repel manipulation. If you don't know what that is, it's basically using repels in order to manipulate your encounters and give yourself a higher chance of finding a certain Pokemon. By putting Monferno, a level 16, at the front of my party and using repel in Eterna Forest at nighttime, I have an 86% chance of finding myself a Misdreavus. Now on paper, you wouldn't think that's too bad. I mean, it's an 86% chance. That's pretty high. You'd be wrong though, because when you do repel manipulation, the chances of finding a Pokemon go down drastically. What I mean by that is, I was running through several repels before even encountering a single Misdreavus. This led to me just going back and forth in the exact same spot for hours. The only reason I'm even considering repel manipulation is because the odds of me finding a shiny in this game are way better than most. That being said, even with that, it took me almost 18 hours and all my in-game currency to find myself this shiny Misdreavus. It took me a while to catch her, but it was absolutely worth it, as after I gave her the nickname Aphrodite, I found out that the nature is timid, which is the best I could have had. With that, I will never use repels again, as the process of going inside my bag, activating the repel, it running out, and then me having to activate another one is dreadful. In this case though, it was absolutely worth it, as Miss Magius has the potential to be a super influential Pokemon. Regardless, with all that out of the way now, I can just continue on in the story and get ready for the second gym. In order to actually challenge Gardenia, I've got to find her first, and since I have no clue where she's at, I've got to look up a YouTube tutorial. Look, we're not all perfect, you guys, and I definitely don't read the text in Pokemon games. Eventually, I do find her and send her back to her gym so I can start my second gym battle. She leads this fight with Blossom as I lead with Apollo, my Monferno. I start this battle off by by going for a fake out and getting a critical hit. To be honest, the crit really didn't mean much, as my Flame Wheel was always going to kill him the next turn no matter what. Either way, with Blossom down, the next Pokemon to get sent in is Roserade. Roserade's physical defense really isn't that great, and due to a combination of the speed EVs I've been investing as well as just Monferno being naturally speedy, I'm able to go first. With that, I take full advantage of my Expert Belt, dealing super effective damage and actually taking the KO on Roserade. This next Pokemon really isn't going to be as easy though, as it's Grotle, who is a lot bulkier. After a Flame Wheel, I don't actually kill, as Grotle is left with a Sliver and I'm hit with a Leech Seed. This Leech Seed forces me to make this battle quick, as if I don't, I'm not sure how much longer I'll survive. On this next turn, Gardenia heals with a Super Potion, but it's not enough to stop a Flame Wheel from killing and bringing up the next Pokemon, Tangela. Against Tangela, and since I have that Leech Seed on me, I kinda don't really feel that confident, and I decided to just switch out into Lucario. With Lucario, I deal some damage with a Crunch, but that's really all I wanted to do to Tangela, is just deal a little bit of damage and get rid of my Leech Seed. With that, I try to switch out into Monferno again, but Tangela has the same idea and moves out into Breloom. This works out really well for me, as Monferno is really good into Breloom, and after a single Flame Wheel, it goes down. This leaves just Tangela and one other Pokemon, and since Tangela took some damage from my Lucario, I'm confident I'll kill with another Flame Wheel. That's exactly what I do to bring out the final Pokemon, Cherim. Cherrim's not too difficult, as all it takes is 2 Flame Wheels to take her down and win myself my second gym badge. The next step in getting past this city is going through a bunch of Team Galactic grunts to eventually get myself in a battle with Commander Jupiter. Commander Jupiter starts with a Golbat, but since I've got Zeus, I simply just strike it down with a Spark, as the next Pokemon to get sent in is Skuntank. Skuntank truly lives up to its name, as it's super bulky and is really strong. To counter its tankiness, I switch into Lucario and set up a Swords Dance. Lucario has a perfect matchup here, as it's not going to take much damage and can do a lot with Bone Rush. That being said, after the Swords Dance, all it takes is 1 Bone Rush to take out the Skuntank and bring out Sableye. Sableye is not really too strong and just goes down to a Bone Rush and Crunch combo, bringing out the final Pokemon, Tangela, who just gets taken down by Apollo. With Commander Jupiter taken down, I get out of that area and find Cynthia, who gives me an egg. This egg I run around and hatch just in case, and obviously I'm not that lucky, this isn't the shiny. But speaking of shinies, there's actually one that I can find on the next route that is a guaranteed encounter and one of the best Pokemon in this game. If you've played Renegade Platinum, you know exactly what I'm talking about, as in Wayward Cave, you can find yourself a guaranteed Gabite. All you've got to do is go to this random tile in the back of Wayward Cave, and if you save right before this point, you can reset this encounter over and over again. So as you can imagine, that's exactly what I did, and I reset this encounter over 1,152 times before I eventually landed myself this shiny Gabite. Gabite took a pretty long time to get into the ball, but eventually I did catch it and gave it the nickname Dionysus. I then took a look at the ability, which was Rough Skin, and the nature, that was Docile. These both aren't a bad thing, so I'm okay with it. From here, I've got to do a bunch of random story stuff, which honestly was all pretty annoying. I also forgot to mention that I just evolved Luxio into Luxray, which is a really good evolution because it gains the Dark typing. Along with that, it learns Crunch on level up, which means I have a Stab Dark type move going into the Ghost type gym. I also find a Dusk Stone, which allows me to evolve my Misdreavus into Mismagius. Both of these 2 improvements on my team are going to be massive going into this next gym battle. You know what else is massive? The amount of hoops I have to go through to find these gym leaders. I mean, oh my gosh. Finally, once I make contact with her, I send her right back to her gym where I can battle her for my 3rd gym badge. She leads this fight with her Drifbloom, as I lead with my Luxray. With Luxray, I start out by going for a charge, which not only increases my special defense, but also makes it so that my electric type moves deal more damage. This simply ensures that I can one-shot the Drifbloom before it gets off a baton pass and switches into Mismagius. With a Spark, I do just that, finishing off the Drifbloom in a one-shot, and the next Pokemon to come in is actually Mismagius. Mismagius is a fairy type in this game, and that means it has access to Dazzling Gleam, and I need to definitely switch out. So that's exactly what I decided to do, moving into Aphrodite, who tanks a Dazzling Gleam and gets brought down to 54 remaining. Thanks to my nature, I'm actually able to outspeed the opposing Mismagius, which allows me to get off a Shadow Ball and one-shot. With the next Pokemon being Dusclops, who's an actual tank, I decide I need to switch out. This causes me to move into Monferno, but to be honest, I probably probably should have just moved into Luxray. Regardless, I right my wrongs in the next turn by switching into Luxray and finishing off the Dusclops with a single crunch. Pokemon number 4 is Gengar, and this thing has Dazzling Gleam, which makes me a little bit scared to stick in, but I honestly feel like it's the best decision because I don't really have anything else that deals with it well. That being said, I get hit by a Dazzling Gleam, but thankfully since it's not stab, it doesn't kill me, and I can freely go for a crunch, taking down the Gengar. Pokemon number 5 is Spiritomb, and for this I switch into Aphrodite and go for a Draining Kiss. Draining Kiss nearly OHKOs, as it has a higher base power in this game than it does in most ROM hacks. That being said, it doesn't, and I leave Spiritomb with a Sliver as I then get hit by a Shadow Ball. Since Spiritomb's stats are relatively poor, I'm not actually too worried about it, and I thankfully don't go down to a crit. With that, Fantina heals with a full restore, but it doesn't really matter anymore as after 2 more Draining Kisses, Spiritomb goes down and brings out the final Pokemon, Bayonet. Bayonet only has 63 special defense, and since I have a lot more special attack, all it takes is 1 Shadow Ball to get me my 3rd gym badge. With that 3rd gym finished up, I get to go battle my rival. I have an answer for literally every single Pokemon on his team, so it's not really a challenge to just blow through him and make my way to the Pokemon Mansion. Once I get here, I find out that nearly the entire place has been overrun by Team Galactic members, so I've got to go fight them all. Thankfully, none of the fights are really difficult until the very last one, where I have to go into this double battle with my rival. Unfortunately, since I'm forced to fight with him, I can't make any of these decisions on my own, and my rival is kinda stupid, so every decision he makes seems to just be the wrong one. The team I'm up against is really not that great, so it's not a problem for now, but in the future, this is gonna be a major issue. With Team Galactic down, I get my hands on a Manaphy egg that unfortunately doesn't hatch into a shiny, so I have to release it. This does mark the end of this section of the game though, and I can head directly towards the 4th gym. This gym is located in Veilstone City, which is possibly the most important city in this entire game. There's 2 real reasons for this. 1, there's a casino, so I can gamble my life savings away, and 2, I can get nearly any item or TM I want. I mean, this place has Focus Sashes, Wide Lens, Metronome, Light Clay, Expert Belt, literally any item you can think of, it's probably in Veilstone. After buying a couple of these items, I realized that I'm ready to challenge Maylene for my 4th gym badge. She leads this fight with Medicham as I bring out Aphrodite. Against Medicham, I start with a Shadow Ball, which does enough to OHKO, as the next Pokemon to come out is Lucario. This is the Ace Pokemon and is truly scary as it has the move Flash Cannon. Here is where I make a massive mistake though, and instead of switching out, I stick in going for a Draining Kiss. This is then when Lucario hits me with a Flash Cannon and I lose all my... Oh wait, I have a Focus Sash. Yeah, with a Focus Sash, you survive at 1 HP, and since your Draining Kiss does half, you can just finish off Lucario with another one. This basically solves the entire fight, as the next Pokemon to come out is Toxicroak, who really can't do any damage to Aphrodite. I mean, it does have Poison Jab, but to counteract it, I just switch into Apollo. Unfortunately, I did get poisoned, so I can't stick in for very long, but it doesn't matter much, as all I need to do is go for a Fake Out and Flame Wheel combo. This then brings out Gallade. Gallade is incredibly easy to deal with, because all I have to do is switch back and forth between Mismagius and Luxray. This allows my Intimidate to continue proccing over and over again, bring Gallade down to -6. With Gallade's attack so low, I can stick in with Mismagius and start to go for a couple of Draining Kisses. Eventually, it does go down, bringing out the second to last Pokemon, Machamp. Don't get me wrong, Machamp is a really strong Pokemon, but this fight was solved a while ago. On the first turn, I go for a Draining Kiss, dealing almost half of Machamp's health as he then hits me with a Thunder Punch. This Thunder Punch doesn't do too much, but because of the Guts activating, I want to switch out, and I decide to do so into Luxray. Luxray's Intimidate drops Machamp's attack by 1 stage, but that doesn't matter too much as I'm just going to switch back into Mismagius anyways. With Mismagius back in, I take no damage because Machamp decided to go for close combat thinking it was going to hit the Luxray. This means all I have to do is go for 1 more Draining Kiss to finish off the 4-arm freak and lead into the final Pokemon, Infernape. Infernape deals a lot of damage and nearly one-shots my Mismagius with a Fire Punch. Thankfully though, Infernape doesn't hit a crit, and since I was faster, I get to go for 1 more Draining Kiss, winning me the fight and getting myself my 4th gym badge. The next major fight we've got to do is against Crasher Wake, and this fight could be really hard. Not only does Crasher Wake have super strong Pokemon like Gyarados, Sharpedo, and Floatzel, but also has the ability to permanently set up the rain. The rain makes it so that water type moves deal more damage, which is a big problem in the water type gym. I just have to hope that the tools at my disposal in Veilstone City are enough to carry me through this fight. My goal for now though is to just simply simply get past Team Galactic, as they're kind of a bother at this point in the game. At the moment, there's really nothing I can do about them, as they just go hide in their hideout, and I am forced to go on to the next route. After an additional 2 or 3 more routes, I find Crasher Wake singing in the middle of a forest. Yeah, I kinda wish he didn't take me into the middle of nowhere, but regardless, I send him back towards his gym and get ready for the 5th gym battle. Like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be raining throughout this entire battle, and since I don't think I can win a fight in the rain, I decide to set up a weather condition of my own. To do this, I find myself the TM Sunny Day. Sunny Day is the perfect TM for this fight, because not only does it get rid of the rain, but it also decreases the effectiveness of water type moves. So I teach most of my team Sunny Day, then talk to the move relearner to get myself a few useful moves that I didn't have access to. With my team properly bulked up, I get myself in a fight with my rival, Barry, or Lame, I guess. I forgot what I named him. It doesn't really matter what his name is though. Barry or not, he still catches these hands from my Infernape, who just got access to close combat. With him defeated, I can finally walk into the gym, but before I do that, I decide to get my hands on a few more useful items in Veilstone. With that done though, I'm ready to get into my fight against Crasher Wake. He leads this battle with Quagsire as I bring out Lucario. On the first turn, I set up a Sunny Day, which allows me to get rid of the rain, as Quagsire then hits me with an Earthquake that brings me down to 1 HP. The only reason I survived this was because of a Focus Sash, and now that I'm at 1 HP, I switch into Aphrodite to avoid an Earthquake on the next turn. Quagsire now only has access to 2 moves, being Ice Punch and Aqua Tail. This makes Quagsire a terrible lead, as both of these moves aren't viable whatsoever in the sunlight. This allows my Mismagius to freely set up a Nasty Plot, as Quagsire hits me for minimal damage with an Ice Punch. After just 1 Nasty Plot, I go for a Draining Kiss to bring Quagsire's health down to a sliver. Wake then heals with a Hyper Potion as I set up a second Nasty Plot, bringing my special attack stat to +4. At this point, there's no reason to stall any longer, as I can just take out Quagsire with a second Draining Kiss, as the next Pokemon to get sent in is Gyarados. Gyarados, being a flying water type, is 4 times weak to electric type moves, and since I learned the TM Thunderbolt, I can use that to do a ton of damage. This causes Gyarados to get one shot, even though it's carrying a Wakanberry, which is supposed to reduce the damage of electric type moves. Clearly, it didn't do that great of a job, as the third Pokemon's in, and it's Floatzel. Floatzel and the next Pokemon Poliwrath both get taken care of by a single Thunderbolt, but this fight starts to get significantly harder when the next Pokemon Sharpedo comes in. Sharpedo is holding a Focus Sash, so there's not a chance I can one-shot it, so instead of trying to kill, I go for a Draining Kiss to bring it down to 1 HP. Sharpedo then hits me with a Waterfall that takes me down to 48 remaining, but even if it would have crit, I had a Focus Sash, so it didn't matter. It's at this point that I make a pretty big mistake, and for some reason, I decide to switch into Apollo. I think my thought process was the Focus Sash was still there, but it was obviously broken by the Draining Kiss I had just used with Mismagius. With Infernape, I don't have good enough IVs, nor do I have good enough speed EVs invested to make sure I outspeed the Sharpedo. All Sharpedo would have to do is hit me with a Waterfall, and that would take out my Infernape. Thankfully for this very situation, I had a plan. Sharpedo's base defense stat is lower than a Magikarp, and because of this, I can do a ton of damage with a not so powerful move. That being said, all I had to do is go for a simple, super effective Mach Punch, giving me +1 priority over the Sharpedo, taking it down, and bringing me into the final Pokemon, Ludicolo. Ludicolo is pretty simple for me to deal with. All I need to do is go for a Charge plus Wild Charge combo, and with that, I win the 5th badge. Now that I've got that badge under my belt, it's time for Team Galactic. For some reason, they decide to light off a bomb in the Great Marsh, and I'm not really sure what it accomplishes, but I chase them all the way back to their secret hideout. On my way there, I meet up with Cynthia, who gives me some sort of drug to clear up the Psyduck's headache. I'm not really sure what it is, but she gives it to me under the name of Secret Potion, and I don't like that. Moving past that though, because the level cap is increased, I can evolve my Gabite into a Garchomp. This immediately becomes a pretty big deal as I use it in my battle against Dawn, and it totally smokes her. After my fight with her, I get into a battle with another big villain, this one being Cyrus. This team isn't even at peak performance yet, and when it reaches that level, I'm gonna be really scared. For now though, I can cope with that fear by trying to obtain myself another Pokemon. So after flying to Jubilife City, I talk to this guy who gives me an old rod where I can move on to the next route to try to catch myself a Magikarp. With this rod, I actually catch a lot of Magikarps, but eventually I do find myself a shiny one after about 7.5 hours. occurs. This Magikarp I obviously catch and give it the nickname Poseidon. I then take a look at its nature and ability and find out that it's going to have Intimidate as well as an Adamant nature, which is one of the best possible combos I could have asked for. From there, I evolve my Magikarp into Gyarados, then have to figure out where I need to go next because I don't play Renegade Platinum that often. Eventually, I do find my way around and get myself into Conolave City, where I've got myself another rival battle. This battle is more of the same stuff we've been used to, with Barry getting taken care of really easily. With Barry down, I'm one step closer to challenging the 6th gym leader, but before I do that, I have to go to Iron Island. Once I get on the island, I fight this guy Riley for whatever reason, beat him, then have to challenge a little bit more of Team Galactic. Riley helps me out in that fight, and after making quick work of those guys, I find Byron, send him back towards his gym, and get ready to challenge him for my 6th badge. He leads this fight with Bronzong as I bring out Dionysus, my Garchomp. With Garchomp, I start by going for a Crunch, doing exactly half as Bronzong sets up a Reflect. With Reflect up, Crunch isn't able to take the KO as Bronzong then hits me with a Gyro Ball. This activates my ability Rough Skin, which brings Bronzong down into the red where he's forced to heal. Knowing that he's about to heal, I decide to set up Stealth Rocks so that future Pokemon take a little bit of damage switching in. With a couple more crunches, Bronzong gets taken care of, and with that, Steelix comes in. I know Steelix is going to go for an Earthquake on my Garchomp, so I decide to switch out into Miss Magius to avoid it with Levitate. The next move Steelix is going to use is Gyro Ball, so I move into Lucario to take not very effective damage. This leads me into an Aura Sphere, and since Steelix's special defense stat is super low, he goes down, and that brings out Fortress. To start, I go for 2 consecutive Calm Minds as Fortress sets up spikes. After a 3rd Calm Mind, I hit Fortress with a 4-time super effective Blaze Kick, taking the Oko. Aggron's next and is easily taken care of by a +3 Aura Sphere, and the same happens with the next Pokemon, Bastiodon. Last up is Magnezone, who really stands no chance against my Lucario right now, so all it takes is 1 more Aura Sphere to win me this battle. With badge number 6 under my belt, I go ahead and talk to the professor as well as my 2 rivals about visiting the lakefronts. Just then, Team Galactic sets off a actual nuke inside of one of the lakes, which why would you even do this? This leaves millions of Magikarps without a home, and now I just have to walk around Lake Valor looking for more Team Galactic members. Eventually, I stumble upon Commander Saturn, who I make quick work of with my Garchomp and Gyarados. From here, I head back to one of the other lakes to help out my rival Dawn. I do this by helping her defeat Commander Mars, and to be honest, I'm not really sure why they're even here. I mean, I understand that they're like trying to get the Lake Guardians or whatever, but I don't really know the story of Pokemon Platinum. If you do, leave it in the comments, cause I'm actually kinda interested. Regardless, with Commander Mars dealt with, I head back to Route 216, where I have to walk through a bunch of snow to get to Snowbell City. On my way there, I obtain a few TMs, then talk to Barry about how he's better than me and on top of this stupid mountain. And honestly, I don't even care. Screw him. Regardless though, after actually making it into the city, there's a bunch of earthquakes going on, so I have to walk into this castle to figure out what it's about. So after beating these 2 guardians at the front gate, I've got to go through ice puzzle after ice puzzle to make it to the bottom where I find the 2 gym leaders and a Regigigas. We sing him a super soothing lullaby that puts him right back to sleep and gets me ready to challenge the 7th gym. Candace leads this fight with Abomasnow as I bring out Ares. With Ares, I start with an Aura Sphere that does just enough damage to take down Abomasnow, leading into Mamoswine. Mamoswine is pretty bulky, but not bulky enough to survive an Aura Sphere from Lucario. This exact same thing happens to Glaceon and almost happens to Walrein, but it has a Chople Berry so it survives. Thankfully, rather than hitting me with any attacking move, it decides to set up an Aqua Ring for whatever reason. This just allows me to get the KO with another Aura Sphere. The second to last Pokemon is Frostlass, and since Frostlass is super powerful, I've got to play it really safe. I know Frostlass isn't going to go for an Ice type move on Lucario, so I decide to switch into Dionysus to eat a Shadow Ball. This Shadow Ball did way more damage than I was expecting it to, as it brought me below half and brought down my special defense by a single stage. Garchomp is a really fast Pokemon, and thanks to the speed EVs I've invested, I'm confident I'll move first. Because of Frostlass's lackluster defense stat, all it takes is 1 super effective crunch to take it down and bring out the final Pokemon, Weavile. Weavile's really not that hard to deal with. I mean, all I need to do is switch into Gyarados and go for a Waterfall. This leaves Weavile with about a 4th remaining, and since its attack is lowered, I can freely switch into Apollo and go for a Mach Punch, taking it down and winning me my 7th gym badge. With that gym finished, I get the HM for Rock Climb. I use this HM to get on top of this mountain where I find my rival getting absolutely crapped on. We'll have to spin back on Commander Jupiter later, but for now, we can't since she ran away back to the hideout. This is the hideout in Veilstone City, and after we go through it, we find Cyrus basically just brainwashing his Team Galactic members. This guy is just straight up a bad dude, so we go ahead and try to fight him. This battle really wasn't too difficult because all I needed to do was set up a nasty plot at the beginning of the fight. Once that was set up, the fight was essentially over, and after heading into the basement of Team Galactic's hideout, I find find Commander Saturn again. This team is just as bad as it was last time, so we fly through him and go ahead and free the Lake Guardians. With that out of the way, we head towards more of the story at the top of Mount Coronet. It's at this point that we have to face one of the hardest battles in this entire game against Commander Mars and Jupiter. Now, if we could do this battle alone, I'm sure it would be way easier, but we have to fight it with my rival, who is notoriously a moron. This makes it a 12 versus 12 battle where Commander Mars and Jupiter have the upper hand. They both lead with Crobats, as on my side, there's Staraptor and Garchomp. One of the Crobats went for a Brave Bird on Staraptor, doing a ton of damage, as I decided to go for a Rock Slide that got a critical hit and took one of them down. That allowed Staraptor to take out the final Crobat and bring out the next two Pokemon, Electivire and Gastrodon. This is exactly what I was expecting. It is perfect for me since my Garchomp has Earthquake and can hit both of the enemy Pokemon. Along with that, since Staraptor's a flying type, it doesn't take any damage from my move, so I can freely take out the Electivire with a one-shot as the Staraptor finishes off the Gastrodon with a Brave Bird. We are making some great progress here as we're nearly halfway through the battle and my Garchomp still has full HP. It's at this point that the next two Pokemon come in and they're Purugly and Tangrowth. Purugly decides to take out my Staraptor with a Fake Out as I go for an Earthquake, dealing a ton of damage, taking Purugly below half, activating its Citrus Berry. Against Tangrowth, I really didn't do anything as it hits me with a Focus Blast, thankfully not doing that much either. Barry then decides to bring in his Heracross, which is a bad decision for him, but really helps me out. The reason for this is because Purugly is going to attack Heracross with Play Rough rather than my Garchomp. That being said, that's exactly what happens as Purugly targets my Heracross and I hit it really hard with an Earthquake. Heracross is able to finish the job with a close combat as Tangrowth takes it down with a Leech Seed. With two Pokemon on the field down, Kangaskhan and Arcanine are both thrown in. Kangaskhan starts by hitting my Garchomp with a Fake Out, flinching me as Arcanine decides to go for a Flare Blitz on Tangrowth. Tangrowth survives with a Sliver and misses a Focus Blast as on the next turn I go for a Dragon Claw to finish it off. This then prompts Arcanine to hit Kangaskhan with a close combat, leaving it with a Sliver remaining. Arcanine then gets brought down to half due to a Hammer Arm and Skuntank gets thrown in. With Arcanine not really having too much use anymore, I decided to just simply take everything on the field out with an Earthquake. This causes Bronzong, Sableye, and Breloom to get thrown in. Crunch is super effective against Bronzong, and with a lucky critical hit, I'm able to take it down with a one-shot as Breloom puts Sableye to sleep with Spore. From here, Yanmega gets sent in, and since she's 4 times weak to Rock-type moves, I go for a Rock Slide that OHKOs. With that, all that's left is a Sableye and a Bronzong in the back, so after a volley of different moves, I take them both down, and I've beaten what's one of the hardest fights in this game. With that being said, there is still a lot more to come. Not only do I have Cyrus, but I have the entire next gym, as well as the Elite Four and Champion. Those fights definitely send a shiver down my back, but for now, I'm not going to worry about it as it's time for me to get into the Distortion Realm. This is a really sick place, exclusive to Pokemon Platinum, and everything's kind of just distorted. I mean, it's all over the place. Things are backwards, there's a bunch of fake platforms that are everywhere, and you get to move left and right, solving really sick puzzles. Unfortunately, I can't just live in this blissful place forever, as I'm gonna go all the way to the bottom and fight Cyrus. In this first fight against him, he leads with Palkia and Dialga. They are both level 70, so as you can imagine, this is a really scary fight. Thankfully, my plan for this is actually really solid, and I lead with Garchomp and Mismagius. With Mismagius, I start out by going for a Moonblast on Palkia. This allows me to do about 2/3, as since I'm faster, I can now go for an Earthquake with my Garchomp. This Earthquake takes out the Palkia, leaving only Dialga remaining. I know this thing is probably going to try to kill one of my two Pokemon, and it can do that. I don't really care, as both of them have a Focus Sash, so it really doesn't matter. Dialga attempts to kill Mismagius with a Flash Cannon, but can't, so I survive at 1 HP, take it down on the next turn, and am ready for battle number 2. In this one, Cyrus has an even stronger team than before. He leads with Crobat, who switches out into Weavile after hitting my Garchomp with a U-turn. This Weavile was thrown into the worst situation ever as he eats a Rock Slide from Garchomp, getting brought down to 1 HP. On the next turn, I'm positive I don't outspeed, so I decide to switch into Infernape and go for a Mach Punch to take it down. This then leads into Gyarados, who I know has Aqua Tail, so I decide to switch out into a Gyarados of my own. The reason I did this was to lower his attack with Intimidate and get a free switch into Zeus on the next turn. Well, about as free as it gets with a Gyarados attacking you. Gyarados nails Zeus with a Stone Edge, but it doesn't do nearly enough damage to KO me, as I then go for a Wild Charge that's 4 times super effective and easily takes the OHKO. With 2 Pokemon down, Cyrus sends back out his Crobat from the start of the fight, and I've got to determine what I want to switch into. In the end, I decide on Gyarados, as I assume Crobat's really not going to do too much damage after getting its attack lowered by 1 stage. With Gyarados in, I set up a Dragon Dance to make sure I outspeed on the next turn, then finish off the Crobat with a Waterfall. With Crobat finished, the 4th Pokemon to come in is Magnezone, who's definitely going for an Electric type move on my 4 times weak Gyarados. Knowing this is extremely extremely useful information as it essentially gives me a free switch into my Garchomp who's immune to electric type moves. After not taking any damage on the switch in, a 4x super effective Earthquake takes the one-shot and brings out Houndoom. Houndoom's also kinda just Earthquake fodder, and once he goes down, the last Pokemon is Honchkrow. Honchkrow really can't do anything against Garchomp, so all it takes is 2 consecutive Rock Slides to take it down and win me my final battle against Team Galactic. With all of that out of the way, in order to get out of the Distortion World, I have to go talk to Giratina. Thankfully, Giratina doesn't actually have to be a really difficult fight, because all I need to do is start out with Zeus and go for a Crunch, doing about 2/3 of its health. Giratina then decides to go for its signature move Shadow Force that doesn't even deal a third in return. With one more Crunch, I can freely get out of the Distortion World and make my way towards the 8th and final gym leader. After descending Mount Coronet, I talk to the professor one more time before heading towards Sunny Shore City. In this city, I meet up with one of the Elite Four members that I'm gonna have to fight, and this only really reminds me of the pain I'm gonna have to go through later on in this run. Regardless, for now, I just find Volkner, send him back to his gym, go through these little stupid gym puzzles before eventually fighting him for my 8th badge. Garchomp is essentially a cheat code in this fight, but I don't start with him as I lead with Ares and he leads with Jolteon. Jolteon starts with a Thunderbolt and gets a really high damage roll as it deals almost half of my HP. I then go for an Aura Sphere, dealing about 2/3, as in the following turn, I decide to go for an Extreme Speed, and since it's priority, I move first and take down the Jolteon. The next Pokemon is Rotom Heat, which is the entire reason why I led with Lucario to begin with. My plan here would have been perfect. Lucario was going to get hit by an Overheat, so to counteract that, I would switch into Gyarados. But because Gyarados has the ability Intimidate, it lowers Rotom's attack by 1 stage, which consumes its White Herb, making it so that Overheat actually deals the special attacking decrease. Unfortunately for me, this didn't end up happening as Rotom just straight up missed the Overheat on Gyarados. Either way, it really doesn't matter that much as all I need to do is switch into Garchomp and start spamming Swords Dance. I get off 2 of those before eventually getting burned by Will-O-Wisp, but since I had a Raspberry, that doesn't matter. At +4 attack, I wipe Rotom off the face of the planet with a Dragon Claw, as next up is Luxray. With Garchomp at +4 and the speed EVs to take me home, I outspeed and one-shot every single one of Volkner's remaining Pokemon, and that wins me my 8th and final gym badge. Now, all that's left in the game is 2 more rival battles and then the Elite Four. These 2 fights before the Elite Four really aren't that difficult, and all I have to do to fight them is head to Victory Road. Once I'm here, I end up taking a wrong turn and eventually end up on Route 224. This is where I fight Dawn, who fights me right away, leading with Alakazam as I bring out Garchomp. Because I went through Victory Road before fighting Dawn, I've got a pretty sizable level lead against most of her Pokemon. Her team's about level 69, as mine's level 71, so with my level difference, I've got a pretty easy time in this battle. She is eventually defeated with the help of all my Pokemon, and with that, all I have left is one last battle against Barry, who's already waiting for me in the Pokemon League. As soon as I try to head into the Elite Four, he stops me and requests a battle, which is a really bad idea since his team really sucks. Guys, it's been that way this entire run. I'm not sure if you expected anything different, but all I needed to do was set up at the start of the fight, and it's kinda just over from there. My Gyarados had set up 6 consecutive Dragon Dances at the start of the fight, which was honestly a little bit overkill, as all of his Pokemon probably would have died to just 3. With Barry defeated, I bring my team up to the level cap, get some more useful items and TMs that I might need for this Elite Four, and get ready for what could be some of the most difficult battles in this entire game. Something really cool about Renegade Platinum is that each Elite Four member has 4 different teams. This is a pretty big reason as to why planning for these Elite Four battles are really difficult. It essentially forces me to come up with a strategy for 4 different teams all at the same time. That being said, after coming up with a strategy for nearly the entire 16 teams in the Elite Four, I decided to go fight Aaron. I leave this fight with Infernape as it's good against nearly every single one of Aaron's leads other than Masquerain. With that, Aaron brings out his Pokemon Yanmega, which indicates that he's going to be using Team A. I know that on the first turn my Infernape outspeeds, but if Yanmega goes for a Protect and gets a speed boost, I definitely won't. That being said, Yanmega really shouldn't go for Protect here as it sees the kill with Hurricane. This plays right into my cards though, as I have a guaranteed one-shot with Fire Punch, and I just decided to go for that, taking the Yoko. The next Pokemon Pokemon to get sent in is Vespiquen, who also sees the kill with Hurricane. Unfortunately though, Vespiquen has Intimidate, which means I'm not guaranteed a one-shot. This forces me to switch out into my Luxray, who takes not very effective damage by a Hurricane on the switch in. I'm fairly confident it's going to go for an attack order, so rather than taking damage, I switch into my Gyarados. I then switch back and forth between Luxray and Gyarados for a little bit, and then I notice that Vespiquen's not really attacking the Gyarados, it's just going for defend order. Once I noticed that, I decided to just stick in with Gyarados and set up a ton of Dragon Dances. Once I'm at plus a lot, I start to go for Waterfalls to take out the Vespiquen. After 2 of those, Vespiquen's knocked off the board, leading into the next Pokemon, Armaldo. Armaldo is a rock type, so it's weak to my Waterfall and definitely goes down to a one-shot. This brings in the final few Pokemon, but at this point my Gyarados is so set up, it should just kill everything. After a couple more Waterfalls and an Earthquake to deal with Drapion, I take the win in my first Elite Four battle. This then brings me on to the second Elite Four member, Bertha. In my opinion, Bertha's team really isn't as good as Aaron's. The only reason I really say that is because if Bertha led with Hippowdon, I would have just won this fight immediately. Unfortunately for me, that's not what she decided to do, as I led with my Gyarados and she led with Tyranitar. Now Bertha actually has 2 different Tyranitars that she leads with, so I'm not actually sure which team she's running yet. Regardless, with either Tyranitar, the strategy is the exact same, and that's switching to Garchomp to hopefully eat a Stone Edge. My Garchomp doesn't take any damage though, as T-Tar went for a Thunder Punch. This confirms for me that the T-Tar she's using is from Team C, and this T-Tar has a Choice Scarf. This means she's forced to go for Thunder Punch, dealing no damage and allowing me to get off 3 consecutive Swords Dances. At plus 6 attack, I easily take down the T-Tar, and every single Pokemon after that I outspeed due to my Speed EVs. I don't care what Pokemon you are, nobody is surviving a plus 6 Earthquake from Garchomp, and after going for a couple of those, a Dragon Claw and a Crunch, I eventually take down Bertha's entire team and win my second Elite Four battle. For my next Elite Four battle, I've got to go up against Flint and his fire types. 3/4 of his lead Pokemon set up Harsh Sunlight with Drought. So to combat this, I do the easiest thing, which is giving Rain Dance to my Gyarados. That being said, Gyarados is who I decided to lead with, as he brings out his Ninetales. Ninetales is the lead Pokemon for 2 different teams, so I'm not actually sure what he's running yet. Regardless, the strategy remains the same, and that's set up Rain Dance as soon as possible. On the first turn, I get hit by a Solar Beam, which deals 56 HP, as I then set up Rain Dance, getting rid of the Harsh Sun. Now, Solar Beam is going to take 2 turns to set up, so as Ninetales absorbs the sunlight, I decide to set up a Dragon Dance. I'm eventually able to get off 3 Dragon Dances before Ninetales hits me with a Moonblast, taking me down to 99 HP remaining, and at this point, I'm kinda a little too low for comfort. At plus 3 attack and plus 3 speed, I still should be good enough to one-shot his entire team, so I just take out the Ninetales with a Waterfall. He then sends out his next Pokemon, Flareon, which indicates to me that he's using Team A. Regardless of which Ninetales team he decided to send out here, I don't think either of them would have been an issue. This is because my Gyarados is now at plus 3 attack and plus 3 speed, which makes sure that I one-shot every single one of his remaining Pokemon, and that's just gonna win me this battle. Next up is the final Elite Four member, the Psychic-type trainer, Lucian. This was always gonna be one of my harder Elite Four battles, as Lucian has Psychic types, and my team really isn't that great against those. I mean, sure, I've got my Dark type in Luxray, but I can't even lead with it, as Lucian has an Alakazam with Aura Sphere. That being said, my best lead is Aphrodite, as he decides to lead with his Hypno. That tells me that Lucian is using Team C, and that this Hypno has Hypnosis. That being said, I've got a little counterplay for that, as I have a Chesto Berry, so I won't be falling asleep in just one turn. On the first turn with Aphrodite, I set up a Nasty Plot, as Hypno goes for a Reflect. On the next turn, I set up a second one, as Hypno then goes for a Light Screen. This lessens the damage of my special attacking moves, and to counteract this, I simply just go for a third Nasty Plot. Hypno then attempts to take me out with a Psychic, but that was never gonna kill, as now I'm at plus 6 special attack and can go for a Shadow Ball. This Okos even through the Light Screen, as the next Pokemon to get sent in is Bronzong. Bronzong has a little bit more special defense than Hypno, but definitely not by a lot, as it's just another one-shot. Jinx is next and gets taken out by another Shadow Ball, and the same happens with Slowbro. This leads me on to the final 2 Pokemon, Gardevoir and Gallade. Both of them fall to the exact same thing I've been doing the entire fight, and with that, I've won myself my final Elite Four battle and can get ready for Cynthia. After taking a good hard look at that deaths counter, I realized that I can finish this game deathless. In order to do that though, I've got to really study Cynthia's teams and figure out what's gonna work. This fight against Cynthia is supposed to be the hardest in the game, as it's the champion battle. While going through each of her 4 different teams, I noticed that they've all got a pretty similar issue. Nearly all of her lead Pokemon aren't really that great into mismatching Mismagius. The only one that's sort of decent is Milotic because it's super bulky, but every single other one I feel like I can take really good advantage of. That being said, I lead with Aphrodite as she leads with her Clefable. That means to me that she's going to be using Team D, which is probably the easiest team I can go up against. Reason being, Clefable kind of sucks. On the first turn, I do my classic set up Nasty Plot as Clefable then goes for a Reflect. On the next, I send off a second Nasty Plot as Clefable then goes for a Light Screen. After one more turn, I'm at +6 special attack, and then Clefable hits me with a Moonblast. With that Moonblast, Clefable didn't even do half, and now I'm ready to start doing damage, so I go for a Draining Kiss to get back up to full HP. This Draining Kiss doesn't kill, leaving Clefable with about a third remaining, as I then take a second Moonblast. After one more Draining Kiss though, Clefable goes down, meaning I have 147 HP going into the second Pokemon, Mismagius. Thanks to my timid nature and the speed EVs I've gotten throughout this run, I'm able to outspeed her Mismagius and get off a Shadow Ball, which does enough to KO. This brings out her third Pokemon, Roserade. Against Roserade, I start off with a Shadow Ball since Poison resists Fairy type moves. To be honest, I assumed that it would just straight up kill, but it actually leaves Roserade with a sliver remaining. Roserade then decides to go for a Shadow Ball, which is really bad for me as I might not survive. I watch my health slowly dwindle down until eventually I find out I survive at 23 HP remaining. On the following turn, Roserade gets healed as I go for a Draining Kiss just to get back a little bit of HP before finishing off the Roserade with a Shadow Ball. That was a super intense situation, but we're not out of the woods yet. Once that Roserade went down, Light Screen actually ended up going away. That is super huge for me as I'm going into the next Pokemon, Milotic, which is super bulky. Against Milotic, I go for a Moonblast, hoping it's gonna kill, and thankfully it does. Without that Roserade surviving earlier, I wouldn't have gotten rid of Light Screen, which means I probably wouldn't have killed Milotic in a one-shot, so honestly, maybe it was a good thing. Regardless, Cynthia's now down to her second to last Pokemon, Garchomp. To be honest, I'm not really sure why she sent out Garchomp in the first place, as it's basically just Draining Kiss fodder. Using Draining Kiss on Garchomp allows me to heal up to full HP and one-shot going into the final Pokemon, Lopunny. Now, to be honest, I'm not really sure why Cynthia just didn't send out Lopunny in the first place. I mean, it's a super powerful Pokemon and has the ability Scrappy. On top of that, it's carrying a Life Orb with access to the priority move Fake Out. As if to show that off, Lopunny decided to go for Fake Out, doing about a third to me. Obviously, at this point in the fight, it really doesn't matter, as I'm freely able to get off a Draining Kiss after that, finishing off Lopunny with a one-shot and winning myself my final battle of this run. To be honest, I can't help but think that could have gone differently for her. I mean, if she just switched into Lopunny before, I would have been forced to switch out, and that Garchomp doesn't die. Regardless, the fight's over now, I've won, and I've officially beaten Pokemon Renegade Platinum using only Shiny Pokemon, Deathless. Thank you all for watching. If you've made it this far and enjoyed the content, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, as it really does help out the channel. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next one.